Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of The Bright Side of Life. I am your host, of course, Melissa Bright, and today we are talking about the fun topic of stress. Yes, we all know stress and what it is, and especially this time of year can be quite stressful. But today, my guest is going to be talking about this topic in great depth, and you will be getting lots of takeaways, such things like looking for signs and symptoms of unresolved accumulated stress, stress management versus stress resolution, and so many more things. But before we get started, I'm going to read a little bit about my guest, and then I'm going to bring him on. Christopher Maher is a former Navy SEAL who endured intense physical, mental, and emotional stress as a child. By combining a SEAL mindset with modern stress management strategies, Christopher taught himself to free his body and mind from pain by developing mental and physical tools for eliminating unresolved stress. Christopher studied traditional Chinese medical practices at the Pacific College of Oriental Medicine and at Yosan University before continuing his studies at the Universal Healing Tao System. He is a student of Grand Master Mantak Chia at the Universal Tao Master School in Chiang Mai. This is a mouthful. Thailand, and is currently pursuing his master's and doctorate degrees in traditional Chinese medicine. Christopher, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and thank you. It's a rainy, cold day in Los Angeles, so I had quite a long drive to get here. Yet I'm happy I made it safe because I mean
Yeah,
it was really pouring down.
man.
Um, and I was up early, and it's cold here in LA. I mean it's 42 degrees,
And
right?
that's not
Everyone
like
thinks it's
LA.
yeah. I mean everybody thinks it's sunny in Southern California. That's like a total myth.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're near the ocean and that cold wind and breeze hit you, it's as cold as it is in cold places in the United States right now. So
Yeah, that is so true. My brother was in the Navy and he graduated in Chicago and from boot camp, and literally his graduation I think was on Christmas Eve, and from the lake and the wind, it literally made it that much more cold. I so when you say like being around the ocean, it being colder, yeah, it definitely makes it feel so cold.
well, I went to boot camp there as well, and I
Did you?
graduated in December also. And I remember how cold it was in Chicago in
Yeah.
those tiny bell-bottom pants that they give
Oh my
you to walk
gosh.
around in the Navy. The
Yeah.
wind is coming. I mean, yeah,
Oh my. Does
yeah.
every does every Navy person go to Chicago or
No,
no?
there's
Okay.
well, when I was in, like, obviously the military is changing the way it does things all the time, so I have no idea how they do things.
Yeah.
But in 1988, there were a few places you could go. You could go to Orlando, you could go to San Diego, or you could go to boot camp in Chicago. And I
Okay.
have no idea why I agreed to go through boot camp in Chicago. I obviously had other choices, but I
Right.
listened to my Navy recruiter and I went with what he presented me with without doing proper investigation.
Okay. And where were you in 1988? Like where were you living? Were you in California then?
No, I'm from Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So born in Philadelphia, went to boarding school in Hershey, Pennsylvania. My mother's from the coal regions of
Ah,
PA.
okay.
So what do we say? Sort of like mid to southeast Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Grew up in
Yeah.
Hershey. Lovely, beautiful place. Went to a boarding school there named Milton Hershey School. Got a great education and got socialized in a very unique way. It was
Yeah.
a powerful experience.
Okay. Now it's funny you say San Diego because my brother then went to San Diego to finish. Well, no, he was West Virginia at one point too, but then wound up in San Diego.
Lucky him.
Yeah. He enjoyed
Yeah,
it. He
yeah.
enjoyed
San Diego's beautiful.
it. Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. All right. Okay. So Before we get started, I know, I already read a little bit about your bio, but I would really like to unpack a little bit of that story more, just so people can know. You don't have to go into great detail, but just what it meant to really endure that kind of stress as a child. And this is, of course, and always just to kind of see if my listeners can relate to this story to say, okay, I might have this stress too. So if you wouldn't mind just telling me a little bit more about your childhood,
Yeah,
and
I
then we'll
mean,
go
it's
from
it's
there.
easy. Yeah, I mean, one of the first things for me really is growing up in a household where you had a mother who was really stressed,
Mm.
right? And so being birthed to a mom who is having some emotional challenges, and if we catapulted her forward to today, she would be diagnosed with having mental illness, right? She committed suicide by the time she was 29.
Mm.
And so she had a lot of struggles from things that she experienced in her younger years in terms of trauma. And, I had a babysitter who was, how do you say it? She had a break from reality, and she thought that the best way to teach me to not play with matches was to put my hands on the gas stove while the stove was on. And, that created a significant amount of physical trauma, but also energetic and emotional trauma, where by the time I was a certain age, I was already displaying high, displaying outwardly that I was in a high stress state. And the way that was happening is I was a stammerer, I was stuttering, and I was already wetting the bed on a semi-regular basis. Um, I was super, super, super shy. Um, yeah. So you look at me today, and I'm the opposite of those things because I chose to do something about it. I
Yeah,
decided that, well, the things that I've been through, those are not going to be my story. And
right.
I decided to go in and make significant change.
Yeah. Now, before we address that, I wanted to ask you because I did say today's topic was stress. And without being assuming, when you talk about stress, are you talking about trauma? And if not, if you can differentiate the two. And it's not that I don't know these things. I just want, listeners to understand. And if they are the same and you're like, no, they're one and the same, um, you can say that too.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give the listeners a really in-depth education. So, um, you have daily stress, right? And daily stress is all the stress that you consume that day, yet you didn't recover from with a good night's sleep.
Okay.
Okay. So now that daily stress gets plugged into what's called your lifetime accumulated stress, right? So a daily stressor could be having to sit on a road for 60 minutes in your car. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And if you got to sit there for 60 minutes and your low back starts to get tight, right? Stress could be you've got a 6-month-old baby who is up at 2 o'clock in the morning because they're severely stressed and they're screaming and yelling, and you get a poor night's sleep. Stress could be you didn't get a meal that day because you're so overworked and so focused you didn't have time to eat, or you more appropriately, you didn't prioritize eating. Okay. Or you didn't get enough water that day, or you had a terrible communication experience with your husband, or your brother came and took something out of your closet without your permission. Do you mean like any one of these instances can cause you stress? You go to work and two of your coworkers have been fired, right? Or let go, and that one of them is already living paycheck to paycheck, and they're a single mom, right? So any one of these outer instances that you failed to recover from fully in a 24-hour period is called your daily stress load. Okay. And again, your daily stress load gets added to your lifetime accumulated stress load if you don't do something to remove that daily stress, right? And so
Okay.
daily stress that goes unresolved for a long time, every day you put in a little more, the next week you have a chunk more, the next month you got a bigger chunk, right? And it keeps growing. That eventually turns into what I call strama. And so strama is stress plus time, right? That transforms into trauma. And the reason why I created that term is because there was nothing in modern society that I read and investigated that talked about how we move from accumulated daily stress into a traumatic state. So, for instance, you could have a woman who's 43 years old and she has, let's say, her menstrual cycle pain has doubled every decade, right? Well, there has to be some way for accounting for that. So much so that when it hits, she can't get out of bed for 3 days and go to work, right? So I would call that traumatic.
Okay.
Okay. And so for me, there's distress. And if you put distress on a spectrum, right, it would go from strama that eventually over time, right, stress plus time that goes unresolved is strama that eventually turns into trauma. So it's the same as if she had been in a car accident and had a somebody hit her bumper a little bit too hard, and now her neck and her shoulders are a little bit stressed. That might be a one-time event, but let's say you have a woman who works at a sewing factory, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she's sitting up here with her shoulders super high, her biceps are short every day, her hand is locked in a specific position, and now she has the same pain that the woman has that was in a car accident, but she has it because it's something that she accumulated slowly over time that eventually turned into the same thing that the woman is experiencing that had the traumatic car accident, right? So there has to be a new term that's developed to understand what people actually have. And that's why, because you talk to a lot of people that think, well, I don't have any trauma, because they associate trauma with like, oh, well, my dad never came home on a drunken bender, pulled me out of bed and beat me up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, every person you've ever met at some level has a significant amount of trauma that's being held in their body, okay, in their brain, in their nervous system. And so if you're a listener on the call, guess what? You have trauma, you have distress, and you definitely have trauma that's turned into trauma if you're old enough to be listening to this call, okay?
Yeah.
So everybody has it. It's whether or not you fit into one of three categories, right? And for me, there's three major categories. There's stress ignorance, which is where most humans are, right? There's stress management. And so there's two forms of stress management. There's positive stress management tools and there's negative stress management tools. And then there's stress resolution, right? I literally own the entire market share of stress resolution, because I've searched high and low to see, is there anything out there that actually resolves your daily accumulated stress, your lifetime accumulated stress, or any level of trauma that you've been through from womb to 13 when your mind was still in a precognitive state of function? And the truth is, there isn't. So I had to create it because for me, I had a deep desire to change the narrative, to change the story. And so fortunate for me along the way, I met a lot of amazing people that knew a little something. And none of them had actually put it all together because none of them was driven enough. The benefit of me going through SEAL training and being in the SEAL teams is my determination and my ambition was met and challenged constantly when I was in SEAL training and the SEAL teams. So I walked away with the ability knowing that whatever came in front of me, I would be able to resolve.
Yeah.
Right. It's like if you want to get something done right, ask somebody in the SEAL teams. Just literally. It's like even if they don't even know anything about plumbing, right? A guy in the SEAL teams will come to your house and he will figure it out, okay? Because we are determined.
Yeah.
So I used the pain that I had in my body, right? The loss of vision, the loss of hearing, the restriction in my range of motion, the poor sleep, the constant waking up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, the emotional disconnection, the dissatisfaction in relationships. I use those as opportunities to look deeper inside of myself and go, hey, how did I get here? Because there was a point where my vision was great, my hearing was great, my sleep was perfect, my relationships were good. What happened? Something must have come into me that's not part of me, that isn't who I actually am. And all these things happened to me when I was severely young.
Yeah.
Okay. So you would expect this kind of story. Yeah, guys in his 50s and his 60s, yeah, he starts to experience some aches and some pains and some restriction. He's getting up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom 1 or 2 times. Even according to Chinese medicine, that would be understandable. But for that to be happening to somebody when they're 29, when they're 30, when they're 31, okay, now that needs to be checked. That needs to be investigated thoroughly to see what's going on. Lucky enough for me, I was super young and I had a lot of core energy because I had all that core energy with my determination and discipline. I could take this and with my mental aptitude, I could figure it out. Right. And again, like I said earlier, I was fortunate enough to come across a bunch of people that knew a few things. And then I took what they had, and then I decided to build something that actually worked from the ground up, was foolproof, and answered the call every time.
Yeah. So I want to bring it back to you. You have honestly answered a lot of questions I was already going to ask. So thank you for that. What made you choose to be a Navy SEAL? Well, first of all, I'm going to ask a question. Do you have to get chosen, or do you just decide I want to be in the military and Navy SEAL is what I want to be?
Well, when you go to a boot camp, when you go to a military recruiter, right?
Okay.
Their job is to slot you in where they have deficiencies in the military, right?
Okay.
So the guy that I went to in Reading, PA, he was just trying to get bodies in the door. He wasn't really interested in what I wanted to experience. But I told him I wanted to go to SEAL training, being the SEAL teams. And of course, probably in the back of his mind, he's like, ha ha ha, I've heard this before, right?
Right.
And I went there with one of my brothers from boarding school. And guess what? Uh, he sent me into the military, but he didn't put me on the right program to get there. So now I'm at boot camp. They go, hey, we're going to show you a film. They show us a film about the Navy SEALs. I think it was like a 45-minute piece. And I was like, I already said this is what I came here to do. And so then I had to go down and take a physical evaluation test, right? You got to swim, do some push-ups and pull-ups and do a run. All those kinds of things were really simple for me. The thing is, I only weighed about 116, 118 pounds at the time. So I was very, very small. And I was still only like 5'6". Okay.
Yeah.
And fortunate for me, I started to grow. I got up to about almost 5'10" at 165 pounds. So that really changed the narrative for me, because as I started to eat and train, my body started to grow quickly. All I needed was a little bit of stress and the right program.
Yeah.
Yet that wasn't all that was required. You had to take what's called a PNO2 test. And then you had to do all these other physiological evaluations. And then you have to go, I had to go to a ship first. I went to the USS Fulton in New London, Connecticut, which was what you call a subtender. And I went there and I had to endure what it was like to be in the regular Navy, right? And it's it's not that that's not an honorable job. It just wasn't what I signed up for. So I wasn't happy to be there, to be honest with you. So I went into town and found a job, right? So I was on the ship during the day, but I had a job at night. And then eventually enough time passed where I went through an evaluation board, and I was able to send off my evaluations plus all the other tests, right? And then it's called, I forget what it is, like a 1602-7 or something. And you send this off to Washington, D.C., and then there's a stack of these, and they pick from that stack who gets to go. And I got my orders and I was off to Coronado. And so that was from the time that I started, that my focus, that would have been July 1988. And then by the time I got there, they got my orders, it was 1990, right? So
Wow.
in my mind, I'm already thinking I'm 2 years behind schedule,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But look, sometimes I don't know if you have a relationship with God, but the way that I think about things is that everything happens the way that it needs to. It happens for a reason. There's purpose behind it. And so that's always been my motto. That's always been my belief system. Maybe I created it to help me understand or get beyond my own stressors and limitations in life, or what we would call my genetic and environmental predisposition. Yet that's what's worked for me. And so I had good feelings by the time that I got there. And then I started the training, and the training is no joke, right? Like from the time you get up in the morning, like you're constantly moving. Like everywhere you go, you have to run. There's no walking. Like there's literally no walking.
Take that out of your vocabulary. It does
Yeah.
not exist anymore.
Yeah. And it was a good place. You know, when you're young and you have a lot of energy and you're a goal-oriented person like I was, and you're result-oriented and focused, that's a place you go to get challenged. Other people, they had different ambitions. Me, I looked at SEAL training, SEAL teams as an opportunity for me to grow, and I wanted them to challenge me. And challenge me, they did. And they found my weak point. And my weak point is I was super, super lean. And so I was highly affected by the cold water, right? Other guys, they couldn't swim fast enough. They couldn't run fast enough. They weren't smart enough. That stuff was easy. Being athletic, that stuff was easy for me, right? Being smart, fortunate. I always had a high aptitude. That was simple for me. But the cold water, now that was a challenge. Okay. Not because I wanted to quit, but because I literally almost couldn't move sometimes.
And that's out of your control.
That's out of my control.
Yeah. And that's hard.
Yeah, and that's hard. And it was hard for me to let go of control, right?
Yeah.
Which is probably why I stayed when I was freezing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So, okay. When you talk about your childhood and you had all this stress and trauma, I don't know if you use this word, healed. Did you already have an awareness that you wanted to be not better, but you wanted to resolve this stress before you even got into the SEALs thing? Because it sounds like you already had a great head on your shoulders before you even joined the military. And if you did, what is my question? It wasn't that the Navy like that helped catapult it, but you already had like a great head on your shoulders, even though you had this trauma from your childhood. Does that question make sense?
Yeah. It makes sense. This is easy to answer for me.
Okay.
I think because I endured so much from womb to 7, that from 7 to 18, I had 11 years, right, of observing myself, right?
Okay.
And my limitations. And so I was able to observe myself every year, speech getting a little better, my comfort level with other people getting a little better, my ability to perform getting a little better. And then by the time I graduated, and I think I was 17 when I graduated, I had already outperformed my predisposition.
Wow. Okay.
So, so when I went into the military and I looked at the SEAL teams and SEAL training, that was only going to push me further,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so my goals, I think what was I, 18, 17, 18? I think at 18, I wrote down a list of all the things that I wanted to experience.
Hmm.
And when I wrote that down, now they call that a bucket list, right?
Yeah.
So let's say I wrote the original bucket list. I think there was like 25 things on it, right? And one of the things was, once I read the biannual magazine about SEAL training and SEAL teams, that was going on my list. And I felt like that was, if I could get through that experience and get into the SEAL teams, I knew somehow deep inside that that was going to be the thing that allowed me to know that no matter what came in front of me, I was going to be able to address it.
Mm. That was like your number one answer.
Yeah, that I knew I would have the confidence in
Right.
order to address and deal with whatever was presented to me
Okay.
by life.
Did you ever, because that's a great way to put that. Did you ever do it to prove to yourself that, like, because a lot of my perceptions are always coming from this not enoughness. I need to achieve to feel like I'm enough and I'm worthy of
For sure. I mean, I
love.
wrote a whole book about it. The book is
Okay.
called Free for Life. And as I go through the first part of the book is a biography, right?
Okay.
And then the second part of the book is a philosophy. And in the philosophy, I go over, you know, looking for the gold star to say that I was winning at life. And
Mm,
I think kids who are traumatized at a very young age are looking to prove that they have value, because whenever you're traumatized, the external suddenly has more value because it's too heavy to spend too much time inside. And so I became outward focused.
okay. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, when you don't have a dad that's around on a regular basis, walking you to school, telling you how important you are, showing you consistent states of affection and love, and that's not happening from your mom, and you're getting that at a boarding school that's really run more like a functional institution, then, because in the student homes that I was in, there was two house parents and there were 16 kids. So I imagine there's kids right now, right? They're 25, they're 28 years old. They just got out of college, they're going to see a therapist because they don't feel like their mom gave them enough love, right?
Yeah.
So imagine being in a boarding school, one of 16 students, and you got two house parents, and they have to show you enough affection and love. And at the school, the house parents are taught to not favor any children, right?
Mm,
Because you don't want dissension amongst the ranks, because all those other kids are going to pick on that kid, right?
yeah.
When
Yeah.
the house parents are gone in their
Yeah.
apartment, they were going to beat that kid up. Oh, you think you're special? Let's show you. Let us show you how special you are, right?
Right.
So I think for me, I crave that affection, right? I crave that recognition. And so I got a lot of recognition for being smart. I got a lot of recognition for performing really well in sports. And so I was going to take avenues that allowed me to continue to get that recognition.
Okay.
I would, in my assertion, my looking back over everything, is that if I'd grown up in a household and I had a mother and a father who had displayed, high states of affection and care, and gave me enough space to make mistakes without ridicule or punishment, then I believe my focus would have been very different. I would have been looking, what value can I add to the outer world versus what recognition can I get from the outer world. And I think that juxtaposition, would have been far more valuable. Yet for what I was sent here to earth to experience and provide and offer, in these challenging times that we are in as a culture, as a community, as a nation, as a globe, was to go through those experiences. And because I have the mental aptitude and the ability to look from neutrality across my existence from womb until now, and look at it objectively and subjectively, I can use those experiences to go, hey, how about I teach you how to de-stress from the daily accumulated stress, trauma, and trauma that you experience, so that you could actually move through life as if you were raised by parents who were consistently affectionate and loving and caring and nurturing and inspiring. And now that's available. So through the work that I've created, I can take someone, regardless of how stressed or traumatized they've been, and I can get them to operate from a place of neutrality and from where they see the world as they want to add value, regardless of what their history was.
Okay. You explain things so well. Like
Thank
you
you.
literally paint this like perfect picture. And I'm just like listening so intently.
Well, you'll be able to go over the recording, because
Yeah.
I dropped a lot in here. One thing that I gave 3 categories, right? I gave stress ignorance, right? Your callers obviously are shifting from stress ignorance to in the know, right?
Yep.
But the thing that they have to know is stress ignorance versus stress management, right?
Okay.
And positive stress management tools would be tools like meditation, exercise, clear communication, authentic self-expression, yoga,
Journaling.
deep levels, journaling. I consider journaling like deep levels of internal honesty, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right. And then you have deep levels of external honesty. And then what you have are negative stress management tools. And if you're a listener on the call, then you want to listen to these. So your negative stress management tools would be excessive exercise. And this gets highly overlooked, right? Like, how many times have you been driving and you see some like 65-year-old guy, he's running and both his knees are bandaged, right?
Yeah.
they're heavily wrapped. Or you go to the gym and the guy's shoulders wrapped and his elbows wrapped. Okay, so excessive exercise. And then you have excessive work, right? You have the workaholics.
Yep.
And then you have the people who are like, they just lay in bed all day, right? Or they get home from work and they play video games from like 6 p.m. till midnight, okay? And then you have these stress management tools that are negative in terms of chemicals, right? So you've got nicotine, caffeine, alcohol, refined white sugar, refined brown sugar, recreational drugs, pharmaceutical drugs, food colorings, and preservatives.
Okay.
And so these are your negative stress management tools, okay? Or yelling, screaming, and punishing other people, right? Judging harshly, criticizing harshly, disapproving harshly, getting in an overly moralizing position and preaching at everyone, right? These are other stress management tools. Well, those are great, right? Yet at the end of the day, what if you could shift from your negative stress management tools into positive stress management tools? And I feel like that's where we accurately are at in the world today. People are able to own, right, that they're stressed. Like, go on a flight, sit in the first row next time, right, and walk from the front of the plane to the back and see how many women that you see have thinning hair on the crown of their head now. Tons.
A lot more. Yeah.
A lot more. So when I first got on a flight, that was one of the things that I noticed. I'm someone who's observant. I'm always checking things out. And
Right.
now I walk from the front of the plane to the back, and it's astonishing how many women are thinning out, right? Why? Because they're under high levels of stress that they were never under before, right? So if you got someone who's got chronic headaches or even intermittent headaches, okay, or they have intense menstrual cramps, or they have toothaches, or they're losing their vision, or they're losing their hearing, or they got poor sleep, okay, these people are highly stressed, okay? Anyone who's using any one of these daily drugs, nicotine, caffeine, alcohol, refined sugars, recreational drugs, what they call plant medicines, those are recreational drugs too, okay? And and pharmaceutical drugs, these people are highly stressed, because if you weren't, you would never use those.
Yeah.
Because a person who's calm, grounded, centered, and aligned never wants to leave a state of neutrality, because in neutrality, guess what you can access? The brighter side of life.
Yeah.
Right? You can access the brighter side of life when you're in neutrality. But when you leave neutrality, you're in what's called a state of vested interest. And in vested interest, I need things to look like this, sound like this, and be like this in order for me to be okay. In neutrality, everything around me can be chaotic. I can allow all this chaos to happen around me, yet I still maintain my alignment and my center line without judgment, disapproval, criticism, or from an overly moralizing position.
You're saying way too many things that I'm guilty of.
Yeah, but it's good, because when you hold up the mirror, right? Like the
Yeah.
beautiful thing about you is you're willing to be honest. You're willing to go, hey, I do these things.
Right.
You go, oh, you mean that's really caused by stress? Where's this stress held? Is there any, oh, you mean stress manifests as tension in the body? And if I remove the tension, I could actually remove the emotional distortion from the trauma as a child. And that would simultaneously remove the stress that caused the trauma and allow me to consciously look at my limiting beliefs from a neutral position and resolve them. Oh, that might be interesting.
Yeah.
Might I take a little risk? Right? And look, anyone who's listening on the call now, I think it's great, right? Here you are, you're taking a risk. You're spending an hour of your day, of your time, going, hey, I'm stressed. I want to learn everything I can to reduce it. What you need to understand is what it turns into, right?
Yep.
Stress always turns into relative and reflective amounts of tension.
In the body.
Stress always gets turned into relative and reflective amounts of tension in the body, but also in the brain and the nervous system.
Okay.
So it affects you electrically, right? It affects you magnetically. It affects you structurally. It affects you conceptually, right? It affects your perspective. It affects your mood. It affects your energy. It affects your ability to analyze, to feel, to sense, to think, to emote. And so neutrality is the place to get to. Because once you're in neutrality, you're able to take ownership of the things that you're saying and the things that you're doing that are going against your own internal set of ethics, morals, values, and principles.
Okay. Let me ask this obvious question.
Okay.
We've talked about a lot, and I just feel that my listeners are like, this all sounds great, but my stress, the things that are causing the stress, saying the commute to work, I'm always at my typewriter, this is what I do, I type all the time.
Mhm.
These things are going to be here. I can't get rid of them, Christopher. So what do I do if they're still always going to be there?
Perfect. It's an easy thing. So what I exposed earlier is that you need to understand what your unresolved daily stress loads turn into, right? And I said they turn into tension.
Yeah.
And so there's only one solution. Like, look, meditation's great, but meditation will not resolve your lifetime accumulated stress load. Not in 1,000,000 years, not in 2 billion years. Okay. All right. If you believe that, okay, it's like fool's gold. All right. Now, how do I get at it? If I can't get it through meditation and exercise is putting more tension in, what's my solution? Is my solution yoga? No, because it's passive exercise, right? You can never passively remove something that was actively introduced. Right? You can never passively remove something that was actively introduced, right? You have to go through active removal strategies, right? And so I created a process called Bestercise, right? Now, what does Bestercise stands for? It stands for BEST, which are bioenergetic self-transformational sequences. And it allows you to utilize 3 forms of contraction. Concentric, which builds strength, okay? Isometric, which recruits more fibers, right? More muscle fibers. And eccentric, which removes tension. Strengthen, recruit, stretch. Strengthen, recruit, stretch. Strengthen, recruit, stretch. Keep doing that again and again and again and again. And then what happens is you start dissolving the daily accumulated stress. And every day you take out a little chunk of your lifetime accumulated stress. And now we're talking, because 28 days from now, if you were to get on a routine, and I offer one of the best in a program that every one of your listeners gets to take for free when they go to the website. When they go to truebodyintelligence.com, they can email at support@truebodyintelligence.com, and they will give them access to the free gift package. In the free gift package, I give them one Bestercise, right?
Okay.
And it's for the large intestine. And the reason why I chose that one is because most people complain of tension and stress around their head, shoulders, and neck.
Yes.
So if they do that Bestercise for 28 days in a row, at the end of that 28 days, the tension around their head, neck, and shoulders is going to have reduced itself severely. So much so that now when they're at the typewriter, right, when they're driving and holding the steering wheel for an hour, and they get home at night, the next day when they wake up, they're not going to feel it, because we use force, right? Eccentric contractions are 30 to 50% stronger than concentric contractions. So when I access the eccentric phase of the Bestercise process, I'm removing massive amounts of tension. If you're a 48-year-old guy and you do that for 28 days, you may have removed decades of tension and stress that have come into the back of your neck and shoulders. That is relief. Now, suddenly your coffee doesn't look as interesting. Suddenly the wine, it doesn't taste as good as it used to. You want to know why? Because those things look great when you're stressed. But when you're neutral, those things look like,
Yeah.
Think about the first time you tasted coffee, where you're like, oh my God, this is so good. This is amazing. The first time someone handed you a beer, right? And you're like, ugh.
Yeah.
Well, when you're highly stressed, you know what? Beer tastes like water. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Coffee tastes like candy. But that's because it matches your stress load. Right? So think of tension and stress. When you reach a certain load, it creates a vibration. It has its own form of intelligence now, right? And now it's attracted at a vibrational level, it's attracted to substances that match that vibration. Well, what does caffeine match? Caffeine matches excessive amounts of dopamine.
Yep.
Right? So what's coffee? Fake dopamine.
Yeah.
All right. What's alcohol? Fake serotonin. Right? But they're fake. And because they're fake, they create more problems than they solve. Like if you go to the mirror before work, you look in your face and you got big bags under your eyes, you're highly stressed. You got organs that are robbing from Peter to pay Paul, to give you enough energy to get out the door. Like if you need 2 or 3 cups of coffee just to be present at work, what's that telling you? That's telling you that you're actually way behind the curve. And now you're using a substance to pretend like you're present. And you're not. You know what's present? Stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol.
Yeah.
And you're driving off of those rather than real energy. So for your listeners that are thinking, well, how do I change this? You have to have a successful pattern interrupt. With no pattern interrupt, you're going to keep on doing the same old thing that you've always been doing. And look, until now, there weren't stress resolution tools. So I get why you're using what you've been using, right? People are going to use what's available to them. But once you're in the know, you can no longer pretend that that's a solution, right? It's a negative stress management tool.
Yeah.
That means it creates more stress.
Yeah.
Right? Marijuana, it's an anxiogenic. What's it mean by an anxiogenic? It's an anxiety-causing agent. Caffeine, it's an anxiogenic. It's an anxiety-causing agent. Alcohol, it's an anxiogenic. Nicotine, those are all anxiogenics, right? What do I mean? That means they create anxiety.
Yeah.
Now, when you're on them, there's a false reduction in your anxiety, but the second you come off them, your anxiety starts shooting back up.
Yes.
And so most humans are on a biochemical roller coaster. Uppers during the day, downers at night. What's their downer at night? Alcohol or pumpkin pie? Alcohol or pumpkin pie?
I'm attacked.
Right? What's their upper? The uppers are simple. Caffeine or soda.
Yeah.
Right? Fake energy followed by more fake energy. Do that for a couple decades, right? And then you go down, you got an important business meeting, you reach down to tie your shoes, and boom, one of your discs slips out of position because your tissues are so dried out and so dense in your body, so toxic, that now you've got a chronic problem in your body that you can't run away from.
Okay. What part did you learn? Because I'm so curious about the Chinese medicine. What made you choose that avenue? Was it an experience that you had that worked for you that you're like, I want to learn more about this?
Yeah, for sure. So I worked with a guy, it's like it's like an Asperger genius.
Okay.
And he taught me some very interesting work, and I did that work on myself a lot. And I realized as I was doing the work that it was not only affecting me at a physical level in terms of a massive reduction in the level of discomfort and stiffness that I had in my joints, it was affecting me at an emotional, psychological level. And he was someone who hoarded information because all of his esteem was built from what he learned and figured out, right? So someone who comes from that position and doesn't read social emotional cues very well, he thinks his value comes from what he created, right? And so he's protecting that. And so I decided, look, you got some great information. Why don't a lot of his information was based on Chinese medicine, the roots of Chinese medicine.
Okay.
And so then I said, you know what? I'm not going to participate in a relationship like this. It's dysfunctional. I'm going to break the relationship. I'm going to go study traditional Chinese medicine on my own. I'll go to school and get a formal education.
Right.
And then once I married those two bodies of knowledge, and I started to understand the really deep meanings behind Chinese philosophy and Chinese meridian theory, and I started to put it into my own practice and my own investigation, because by nature, as I said earlier, I'm an observer, right? And I'm a scientific minded person. So I like to synthesize systems. I like to see what real value is in them. And then I like to add them to my own process to see if they actually do what they say and say what they do. And the majority of them don't. They promise you a mile and they offer you an inch.
Yeah.
And this is where I think and understand why a lot of people have been frustrated when it comes to looking for a holistic solution to physiological, structural, emotional, and psychological and spiritual challenges that they're having. Because the tools that are out there and are available, they don't offer enough punch.
Yeah.
Right? They don't generate enough force. And I realized that the greatest thing about force, the more force you have, the greater change you can produce, right?
Yep.
Little force, little change. No force, no change. Big force, big change. Maximal force, we get maximal change. And so I've been fortunate enough to be able to take all that information from traditional Chinese medicine and look at it from a very physical perspective, a very intuitive perspective, and then add in my scientific mind and my ability to research effectively to produce repeatable, verifiable results every single time. And then to then teach others to do the same thing. So we've been able to impact the culture in a very big way in terms of stress reduction, right? Creating a successful pattern interrupt, and then allowing and then teaching others how to do so. And the benefit of what we do at True Body Intelligence is we teach you how to do it to yourself. Why? Because the only way to empower someone is to teach them to fish. Right? Because if I teach you to take care of yourself, then when your challenges come up, you don't have to lean on me. I'm allergic to codependent, dependent relationships, right? I'm into interdependent relationships. What's the only way to create an interdependent relationship with someone? You have to teach them what you know, and you have to be willing to share. I was in a dynamic where this guy, he was share a little bit, but I wanted full access. And you know, where he was at an emotional level, he was able to provide that.
Yeah. And it's good that you saw that.
That's right. And the truth is if he did, would I have gone out into the world and investigated thoroughly and traveled all over the planet, looked over under every stone that I could to find more answers? I probably wouldn't have. I probably would have relied on him. And so in a certain way, his choice to withhold information allowed me to investigate thoroughly and to take on my challenges as my responsibility. And that's what everyone who's listening here has to understand. Your stressors are your responsibility, right? I gave you the 4 keys, the 3 paths that you need to understand: stress ignorance versus stress management versus stress resolution. What does stress resolution mean? It simply means that I have resolved my daily and the lifetime accumulated stress load that's being held in my body, my brain, and my nervous system. Okay. Every day, are we accumulating more? Yes, we are. But when you have powerful tools for change, you can remove the daily stress that you picked up. Like I just drove 3.5 hours this morning, right? I can spend literally 4 minutes. I got out of the car. I was like, oh, this is a little tight. That's a little tight. Okay. I walked around for a few minutes. Oh, I felt back to normal, but there's a part of me that knows I need to spend 5 to 7 minutes today at some point removing some tension and stress from my body.
Yeah.
And I can do that. I know exactly what to do and how to do it. That's it. Boom, 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 boom. And it's over. I'm moving on to the next moment.
Right. I feel like this is going to be a bold statement, but I feel like I'm on to something. There are different people that might feel that stress is only in a certain place, like where you talked about it's in the brain, it's in your nervous system, and it's in your body. Where a lot of people are like, I'm stressed, they're thinking about it, so then it must only be in my brain. Or, oh, I only feel it here in my body, it's not affecting my mental health, my brain, when all 3 are absolutely connected. And you have to address all 3 before you can really see a change in that. And I think that's one of my biggest takeaways that I want people to know. Just like with trauma that we've talked about, I feel like many people don't realize that trauma is actually stored in your body. It's not just your brain and it's just up here and I can just think this away. No, it's in your body too.
It's in your body.
Yeah.
Right? So even if you live in the Crystal Palace, which is someone who's a thinker, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Uh, most people's minds are running, they're spinning too fast, right? Or their thoughts are fragmented, right? And if you're ungrounded emotionally, which means you have anxiety, anyone who's listening right now, if you have any measure of anxiety, if any measure of discomfort, stiffness, or pain in your body, if you have any measure of reduction of energy in your system, meaning if you're 55 and you have less energy than when you were 5 years old, that's a reduction in energy. And if you have a mind that has fragmented thoughts or is running too fast, you're highly stressed. Those are your four worlds: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, right?
Okay.
Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. So what you have to do is you have to engage in what I call the honorable quality. What's the honorable quality? Honesty. There's two versions. There's inner honesty and there's outer honesty. Go to a mirror in your house and sit there and talk with yourself honestly. Okay? Do an honest assessment of what's actually happening in your life. Ask yourself, is my energy a 10 out of 10? Is my emotional wellness a 10 out of 10? Is my energetic health a 10 out of 10? Is my physical health and wellness a 10 out of 10? If it's anything less than that, right?
Yep.
Take a risk, okay? And the risk is very simple. Order the book I wrote. It's called Free for Life, right? A Navy SEAL's Path to Inner Freedom and Outer Peace. Read the book, get a basic education. In the last section, I talk about the 5 systems within true body intelligence, right? Get access to one of these systems and start reducing your lifetime accumulated stress load. Okay.
Yeah.
I've worked with and on people for a long time. And whether you're 7 or you're 77 years old, people's lifetime accumulated stress load is on average an 86 out of 100. That's average Joe or average Jane.
Right.
Okay. 86 out of 100. That's too much.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Right? If you could get that down to 50, your aging process would stop overnight. Right? Your face would still be attractive. Your body would be strong. Your energy would be abundant. Your mind would be clear. Your emotions would be grounded. Your sleep would be satisfying. Your food would taste amazing. Like when you continue to be dishonest with yourself, right? You reduce your ability and opportunity to have an extraordinary life. Okay? Because your perceptual filters, they change, they reduce. You have to numb. People are numbing out from the stress of life, and they're so numb, they think that they're not stressed, which puts them in the category of stress ignorance. If you're using substances to avoid feeling, you're highly stressed, right? And so the key is honesty. That's it. Get in the mirror. Have an honest conversation with yourself. Look deep into your soul and go, look, where am I missing out? Okay. And again, if you have headaches, okay, if you have poor sleep, if you have discomfort in your body, if you have an overactive mind, if your emotions are ungrounded and you're dealing with anxiety, if you have relationship issues with your mom or your dad or your husband or your children or your best, all of these are indications that you're highly stressed, and you've got to be honest with yourself. Okay. Yeah. Anyone who's listening, I get it. I was there. Okay. Having a clear mind is amazing. She said several times on the call, it's amazing how well you explain everything. Do you think this is because I'm special? No. It's because I put a little bit of time in, right? And that little bit of time allowed me to have a very clear mind. I put a little time in, and that allows me to have a very comfortable body. I put a little time in, that allows me to have intense amounts of energy every single day. If I sleep 3 hours, it's not an issue. If I sleep 2 hours, it's not an issue. If I only get 1 hour of sleep, it's not a problem for me. I could have 3 hours of sleep, 4 to 5 hours of sleep every night for months, and I still function at a very high level. No nicotine, no caffeine, no alcohol, no sugar, no chocolate, no recreational drugs, no pharmaceutical drugs. I don't have any of that stuff. And my energy, I'm going to be 60 pretty soon. And everything is functioning as it was designed to be. And if it's the opposite for you, okay, that's where you have to take a risk. Take a little risk. You're worth it. I promise you. Maybe your parents never told you that they loved you. Maybe your dad never hugged you the way he needed to hug you. Maybe you had a teacher who kind of shut you down and humiliated you in front of other students. Maybe you didn't have a lot of athletic potential, but you were interested in sports and you never got picked for the team. Maybe, your IQ is average. But I don't believe any of that. I believe every human on the planet is extraordinary and has access to some level of genius that they were born with if they're willing to do the work to get in there and get it out, because stress reduces your intelligence. That is the biggest thing that people need to understand. It reduces your intelligence. What do you mean by intelligence? Your physical intelligence. It reduces your emotional intelligence. It reduces your spiritual intelligence. It reduces your analytical intelligence. Yeah. Which then means if you reduce it, it does the exact opposite. It increases your emotional intelligence. It increases your physical intelligence. It increases your analytical intelligence. It increases your spiritual intelligence. And now, when you get to the crossroad of life, instead of turning left like you always do into self-defeating behavior, you decide to turn right. Yes. Because you've had a successful pattern interrupt with no risk of sitting in front of the mirror and talking with yourself. You're never going to attract anyone to you that can help you have a successful pattern interrupt. And I have created a system that interrupts every pattern that I've ever known successfully.
You're amazing.
I am.
People 1000%. Need to go check that out. People, I want to get your book. I seriously want to get your book.
Yes. It's going to be a game changer. When you get my book, you have my number.
Yeah.
Easily. You call me. We sit down, we have a conversation, and I'll do everything that I can to help you.
Perfect. Well, you have seriously covered so much in this hour. Is there anything else that you want my listeners to know about stress, or anything else? I know we've covered a lot, but anything that you can think of?
I mean, sure. Like, look, if you're feeling anxious, let's say you're getting ready to do a speech, or you got to go up in front of class and present something, or you're dreading this emotional conversation with your wife, or whatever you're under right now, realize that, look, you're on a planet and there's a lot of powerful tools in the world right now. Okay. And this is a time in humanity where it doesn't matter how much money you have. Okay. See, before, people who had resources, they were the ones who had access to all the good stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But now the playing field has been leveled, where the average Joe and the average Jane, as long as they care about themselves enough to grow beyond their own limitations, or are willing to take a risk, there's ways of interrupting these stress patterns. And the easiest one is, if your anxiety is, let's rate it from 0 to 100. If it's at a 30 and that 30 feels overwhelming, sit down and breathe really deeply for like 3 or 4 minutes, right? All the way out, super slow, all the way in, super slow. Do that for 3 or 4 minutes. I promise you're going to get an immediate reduction in your anxiety level and your stress load, and you will be able to perform appropriately. Yes. That doesn't cost any money. All it requires is a little bit of time. And there's people on YouTube that are teaching people how to do breath work, right? Yes. That's a needs reduction. Is that going to change your lifetime accumulated stress load? No, never. Not in a million years. Anybody who tells you that is full of it. Okay. I'm into I see, I don't have the opportunity to pretend. I can't live in fantasy. I have to live in reality.
Mm-hmm.
And in reality, you can have an interrupter for that moment. But if you really want to get the most out of this body, this brain, this gift that you've been given, you've got to reduce your lifetime accumulated stress load and your daily stress load, which means go to truebodyintelligence.com, start to follow me. I'm on a lot of podcasts. I educate people. There's a book out there that you could read. It's inexpensive. Like, look, it's LA, right? If you want to get a good burger, you have to pay $25.
Yeah.
Right. The book is like 1997 or something. Okay.
Right.
You got to take a risk. Like, if you don't invest in yourself, how do you expect the universe to invest in you?
Yes.
Okay. Obviously, you're on the call because you care enough, right?
Yep.
Take some risk.
Such a good point. Such a good point. And I cannot stress, no pun intended or pun intended. The breathing, he is so spot on. It can change a lot for anxiety. And I say this every time on my podcast, like, it all sounds great in theory. And you're like, yeah, that sounds great. No, I've never tried it. Really? You're just going to tell me to breathe? Yes, we are telling you to breathe because it is going to calm down your nervous system and it will help you.
Yeah. In the moment. And we're saying,
Yes.
what we're saying is, in the moment,
Yes.
that's causing you to be in a state of overwhelm. But for the long picture, it will never be a substitute for reducing your lifetime accumulated stress load. Okay.
Exactly.
We have to live in reality rather than fantasy.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly that. All right, Christopher, I have one last question that I ask all my guests, and I'm going to ask you the same thing. In your own words, what does the bright side of life mean to you?
The bright side of life means to me having an opportunity to experience what it is I really want in life, and to be able to share, right? To be able to share the gifts, be able to share the love that I have, to be able to share the wisdom that I've gained over this journey in this life, and to being able to have opportunities to explore the world around me from a place of neutrality, right? Like, I love people. I love humans. I love animals. I love the journey. I love mountains. I love oceans. I love lakes. I love traveling, and all of it puts me in a brighter side of life.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on here and sharing everything. I have learned so much, and I know my listeners
Thank
have
you.
too. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And remember, learning is wonderful, but heartfelt action to your own benefit is where the rubber meets the road. You got to take action. It's nice for me to come in here and download you with information and understanding and provide clarity for you. You have to be willing to take action, heartfelt action to your own benefit.
Yes, that's exactly it. I say that so many times on my podcast. They're probably tired of me saying that.